Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 101. Faith. As for introductions, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia, and currently sitting as junior warden again. And I'll hand it off to Juan Sepulveda. Or Sepulveda?
Juan Sepulveda here.
Sepulveda.
Host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast and a proud member of Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida.
All right. Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson here, a past master, sorry. A past master of Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, current secretary and host of the Masonic podcast that's on Sundays.
Cool. Very cool. Jason Richards.
Hey everybody, Jason Richards here, Senior Warden of Acacia Lodge number 16 in good old Clifton, Virginia, and not Junior Warden of the Patriot Lodge number 1957.
Yes. Now not a member of the Patriot Lodge.
I wasn't going to go there. Thanks for outing me.
You're welcome.
Yes, newly non-member of the Patriot Lodge.
You know, that would be a good topic to talk about that.
Demitting?
Yeah, just their thought process, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we'll do it for another show.
If you're comfortable.
Intervention. It'll be,
Yes.
Why did you leave me?
Yes.
Why did you leave me?
Before you
walk in.
explain, we should ask brothers for speculation on the page of
Why?
the Masonic Roundtable.
Why did he miss?
What happened?
This is a terrible idea. Don't we have someone else who needs to introduce themselves?
And we have a handsome new guest. Oh, wait. It's our regular
Let's go to
host,
Nick Johnson, who's in like his sister's house or something.
Nick Johnson.
Well, you see, I moved a little bit in my house, and all of a sudden, the signal showed up. It's amazing.
You look fantastic, Nick.
Well, you know, I have a makeup girl over here and a hair gal over here, so I'm looking great. But thank you very much for the compliments.
What's that, Robert?
I said you leave the northern jurisdiction out of this.
Oh.
Ooh. But I'm a past master of Corinthian Lodge number 67 in big time Farmington.
All right. Thanks for joining us. For Masonic news this week, it's a little light, fortunately. And we wanted to make sure that we reintroduce something we brought up in the previous episode, which is, in particular, the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge, which is a Grand Lodge sponsored event, will have not one, not two, not three, not four, but all five of the hosts of the Masonic Roundtable at the Masonic Cultural Center on Saturday, March 19th, 2016, which is in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, right outside of Harrisburg, state capital. And it's an all-day event. All five of the hosts will be giving individual presentations, followed by a panel at the end. So it will be a literally once-in-a-lifetime event that this is the first time all five of us have been in the same place at the same time. So check it out.
It's the first time any of us have met Nick.
Yes. I think that's why he's coming crystal clear in the images, too.
Yeah, exactly. See, I am
You're not
here
going to know what he looks like.
I want to entice all of you to see me like this again.
He might be computer generated for all we know.
Yes.
Well, Sheeple was, so, you know what I mean.
Ah.
He's
that's
like
bringing
the
it back.
Gorillas.
That's deep.
He's actually like the lead singer of Blur.
Nice. So that will be great. You do have to pre-register. Send your name, lodge number, and home zip code by email to amksecretary@pagrandlodge.org. That's amksecretary@pagrandlodge.org. They're trying to get a head count for food and accommodations, etc. Should be an awesome time.
We're going to be there, so it will be an awesome time.
Yes, without a doubt. Looking forward to it.
It'll be fun.
Do we have any other Masonic news we want to mention? Jason, is there something you had on your mind?
Yeah, April 30th, John and I are going to be up in New York. Not New York City, it'll be more upstate New York, at a Masonic Education Symposium brought on by Worshipful Master Andre Beliveau, and I'll get more information on that at some point soon. But if you are in the New England area and want to come and hang out with us for a bit, it'd be great to have you.
Save the date.
Oh, and Masonic Week is coming up.
Right around the corner. That is true.
We'll be there too.
And I know that Robert Johnson, Jason Richards, and myself will be there interspersed. So find us and get a beer.
About Masonic Week, anybody who's looking to go, really take a look at the schedule of things that are going to happen.
Because you can't go to the vast majority of things that happen.
Very true. Yeah. Like I was thinking about going Thursday through Sunday. Well, I am going to fly in Thursday most likely and fly home Sunday, but I'm flying home early on Sunday because there's nothing that I can really go to on Sunday. And
you don't want to stay for the operatives?
No.
Well, Don is heartbroken.
I'm sure he's not. But Thursday is basically all day a bunch of stuff that you can't go to unless is it an Acorn? Something like that. So I don't know, but just check that out because you don't want to show up for nothing. Yeah, it says scroll down a little bit.
Yeah,
there.
we got St. Thomas of Acon on Thursday, the 11th.
And all of those say Acon members and ladies only.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to make the AMD installation. Have a beer with some brothers. See the Society of Blue Friars.
Yeah, that's always good.
You can pay $25 and join the Night Masons.
Is that? Can you really? I was looking at the order of what is it, the Red Scarlet Cord or something like that. You pay the fee and you get 3 degrees.
Actually, I've heard the Ancient Rite of Corks is quite a fun degree.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And held and hosted by most worthy Don McAndrews, who's been on the show.
Grand Bung of the Americas.
Best title.
Yes.
So if you are interested in Masonic Week or in the area or you're traveling, check out yorkrite.com/Masonic Week.
And buy me a beer.
And don't buy the lunches.
And buy me a beer. Mickey
D's.
You're in Crystal City. I guarantee you there are better places to eat for a lot less money. I'm going to get so flamed for this episode.
Good stuff. That's all I've got. So let's move into the Masonic Monday question.
On Tuesday.
Oh boy. And guess what? You guys can see what I look like. This is really uncomfortable right now. Let's see. I kind of skipped a week and I don't even know where I am here for because we had last week, obviously. So, did I do the President Lincoln question here yet?
Oh, you spoiled it. Oh, no.
Okay, awesome. All right, good. Well, here's the answers because I think I said it on the show, but then I didn't. Anyway, neither here nor there. So, Greg Guffey, Christopher Croteau, Justin Miller, Jonathan Primo, Steve Higdon, James Webb, Joey Boyer, Larry Fama, Will Fowler, Frank Scrobat, Mike Hambrecht, and Egg Nair. Congratulations, you got the correct answer, which was Issachar Zachariah, who actually brought the Order of the Secret Monitor, which is actually related to the Scarlet Cord. I just ruined another question, didn't I? Crap. He actually brought that from the United States back to England, and he is buried in Highgate Cemetery in London. All right, here's your question for the week of January 19th, 2016. During the early era of the Grand Lodge system in England, a number of Englishmen, including many Freemasons, invested heavily in the growing New World economy. And as in all rapidly expanding markets, a bubble was formed. When the bubble burst, Masons like Dr. Anderson of Anderson's Constitution fame, were left destitute, dependent on the love and charitable kindness of the fraternity. What was the name of this famous economic bubble? When you have the answer, send it to masonicmonday@gmail.com. Don't forget to include your lodge name, your lodge number, and the hashtag #TinyBubbles. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so we're all caught up now on our Masonic Monday questions. Is that correct?
I think so. I hope so. We'll find out.
Good. Moving to this week's topic. We had an excellent 100th episode, so again, thank you for the guest hosts of episode 100, our Racism in the Craft episode. We've had good feedback so far. We think that the conversation was handled in a professional and delicate manner, and there's great discussion. We've already had requests to do a follow-on, so we'll see how that fits in the schedule, but we want to make sure that we mix it up as we tend to do and get a variety of topics. Which leads us into our next series. Yes, that's right. Based on your feedback and how much you enjoyed the 4 cardinal virtues, we are starting part 1 of our 3-part series on the theological virtues, starting with faith, proceeding to hope, and ending with charity. And we'll talk more about the remaining 2 in episodes 102 and 103. So let's dive right into faith. Now, it's been my research that both the 4 cardinal virtues as well as the 3 theological virtues, which you could argue is a trivium and a quadrivium in itself, they derive from a lot of the research done by St. Thomas Aquinas that are virtues of the church. And so we spent a lot of time in previous episodes talking about temperance, fortitude, prudence, justice, how we apply those in our daily life, what they mean to the philosophical Mason, and how we're supposed to practice those as virtuous characteristics in our daily life. Now we transition into a new set of virtues, and how that set differentiates from the previous set is that these are more theological. What do we mean by that? They're theological because the primary object acted upon those virtues is on God. It's no longer just something that all men should attain to, of being prudent and being just. It is now a direct connection, and we'll learn more here, more an infusing of the Creator with the individual. So it's no longer just be a good person, it's be a good person now through salvation. Again, we're going to talk some religious themes here. This is by no means an endorsement of any one religion. We're going to talk about where it came from. So it is very heavy in the Catholic instruction. It's very heavy in some of the early Christian texts, but it has carried through into the rituals that we're familiar with today. To start, where did these come from? So these came from Paul's letters to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 13:13, where he says in the King James Version, "And now abideth faith, hope, and charity, these 3, but the greatest of these is charity." And if you want to find out why it's the greatest, stay tuned for episode 103. Well, let's start with faith, and depending on the text that you read, they're in that order on purpose, that you get hope through faith and you get charity through hope. So you have to start with a foundation of faith, and then similarly the most important of those virtues is charity and works backwards. But let's see, the faith, or all 3 of these actually, these theological virtues, this is my research, so I'll shut up in a minute and let the other guys chime in. I thought this was really interesting, trying to figure out, one, why they're included in the ritual that we know today, but they're theological in the sense that they act on God, and they're different from the other ones because God has to be part of them, that they can't be done just by reason alone. You'll see in other text, like Masonic encyclopedias, you'll see where they've replaced faith with trust. But if you read other sources, like other Catholic sources, it's not by trust alone. It has to be also endowed by the Creator to continue your faith. So I'm struggling with how that all works, but it seems to be a common theme through that. But just to summarize, why these three are called theological virtues, they have 4 attributes. One, they're not attainable by a human's natural capacities. That's what we said. It's not just by us willing it alone do we get faith, hope, and charity. Number 2, they are only attainable through a certain participation in God's nature. Number 3, they are infused by God and direct a person sufficiently toward God as the object of supernatural happiness. And finally, they are known only through divine revelation. So as I was doing some research on this, one thing that stood out to me was that faith, like, if I try to describe something to you and say that that there is a spaceship on the backside of the moon, right? If you can't see it, you have to trust me. But it's beyond that from a theological perspective. It's that according to St. Thomas Aquinas and the other Catholic teachings, that in order to get that first trust in God, that it seems kind of cyclical, that God has to endow you with faith so then you can trust God. And the more you trust God, the more He endows you back with faith. What do you guys think about that? That's been hurting my head theologically. Robert?
I think it really has kind of a basis in what today I think a lot of people would find a similar feeling in the evangelical Christian movement of the idea of surrender. Faith in that their life is in the hands of the Creator or their God, Jesus. And that idea is not natural to mankind, like you were alluding to. We have to usually see to believe, which kind of brings you to the idea of, really there's 2 kinds of faith. There's religious faith and there's scientific faith. The scientific faith is kind of like, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy Legos, and my faith is that all those pieces are there. Because that faith is based upon the fact that every time I bought Legos before, all those pieces were there. Right? Sight seen every time.
Correct.
The religious version is a little bit more difficult. And I can see where, they say that you have to be endowed with faith to the Creator to have more faith, kind of like the dollar bill and the treasury bond. So what you've got really is this idea of faith in religion, or in any religion, Christian or not, that you have to have faith or trust in stories that you don't have any basis in outside the fact that they're in a book. You didn't see those things. You trust other people's stories and their faith, and so you kind of see that recycling of faith, or that snowball effect of faith throughout, particularly Christian texts. And I think that's why Christians the big religions of today that are out there really have a really strong root structure in faith. And I think it's due to the kind of that snowball effect of the faith in the stories coming to you, and you have to have faith to believe in those, and then ultimately faith in the Creator. And it's really interesting, and something I've somewhat removed myself a little bit with, but I do study world religions, and it's fascinating.
Well, I think Robert hits the nail on the head there very well, especially with looking at faith as the idea of trust, because that's actually what Albert Mackey terms it as. He says, faith as far as the purposes of the Masonic ritual go should actually be read as trust. Yes, it is trust in a creator. And yes, with the idea that faith imbues you with more faith, I mean, I see that as a chicken or the egg um, kind of problem where it's almost getting into like the predestination and other Calvinist philosophies and circular logic. But I think as Masons, we learn to trust right up front. Not only in we're asked, in whom do you put your trust? Plain and simple. That's one of the first things you're asked as a young candidate. You also have to have trust in your brethren. When you fill out a petition, you have to trust that those brethren that say they vouch for you are going to actually vouch for you in front of the lodge. So I think faith really is foundational to who we are as Masons, and that is a virtue that is reinforced time and time again throughout the 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge.
Well, and going off of the concept of trust, the actual root word of faith within English is, from Old French fides, and fides was the goddess of trust. And so, it goes all the way back to its Indo-European root that goes back to the idea of to command and to persuade. And actually, every single faith, I should say, every single religious practice, when it looks at faith, looks at the concepts of certainty and truth, but not necessarily reason to get there, whether it's emunah, in Hebrew, or iman in Arabic. It's this concept that you're trusting in a metaphysical concept that doesn't need to be reasoned. It can be reasoned, but it doesn't have to be. And so, and then going down into Christianity, C.S. Lewis, I think, described it best when he said, faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. And I think that's foundational to how to, at least in my mind, think of faith. It's that holding on to those things. So it's a trust, and it's a trust. And it's kind of strange too, because when you do look at the Indo-European root word of it, it's the idea that God both commands and persuades, because the root is related in that way. So, it's one of those that we trust in the Supreme Being, and then and the Supreme Being trusts in us. A similar concept, and with Masons, it makes a lot of sense that would be our first point of contact for a brother, is to have that abiding faith, and then everything else can be worked from it.
Mm-hmm. Juan, what do you think?
I got a lot of stuff going through my head right now.
And this is heavy stuff.
Yeah, it is heavy. One of the things that is coming to mind is my state of mind during my initiation. I clearly remember not knowing enough about Freemasonry to be completely at ease with what I was about to encounter. So my first experience with Masonry, once I was prepared as an entered apprentice, was to put my faith in God, that what I was going towards was something that was agreeable in his eyes. And I distinctly remember, and I don't know if I mentioned this before on the show, but I remember having a conversation, speaking to God and saying, God, if this is something that is going to be detrimental to my life, to my progress as a human being, allow me to discern that, and allow me to understand and continue the journey. And there's a portion of the initiation in which I felt so at ease once certain things were revealed to me, that I felt, no, I'm in the right place. So initially, my faith, I had to put faith on these men who I did not know, that they were going to have my best interest in mind, and consequently putting my trust in God that He was not going to allow me to go forth with something that was going to be detrimental to my life. So those are the things that I was thinking about as we were discussing faith, and I have other things to contribute later on about faith beyond just the dogmatic or religious aspect of it. So.
Yeah, I did the same thing, Juan, when I was looking at joining Freemasonry.
Oh, really? Look at that.
Yep.
Well, let's go with that since we're there.
So, when coming from the Christian upbringing, being a drummer in church, my faith has always been really important to me. And when you look up, the juxtaposition of Freemasonry and Christian, or Freemasonry and Christianity, you don't get a lot of good articles whatsoever. And so my mentor at the time, David Hill, and I were talking about that. I was like, look, there are a lot of things written about Freemasonry from the perspective of the church, and none of them are good. And he said, well, you know what? I got this guy. He's a young guy like you, and he's kind of annoying, but he's good to talk to. His name's John Ruark, and he'll be a good person for you to talk to. And so, it was important to me that my endeavors in my own life didn't get in the way of my own personal faith.
Well, I think you should add, because this is the part that I remember, that exact conversation, the very first one you and I had at work, once we got introduced to the mutual third party, was we started talking about, you were asking me specifically about how does your faith apply to Masonry. I said, well, it's helped me grow spiritually. It's supplemented my Christianity. I said, I'm active in my church, and I said, I go to this church right down the road, and named the Methodist Church, to which I remember you laughed out loud because it was the same church that that I went to.
Yeah, we're members of the same church.
And our paths hadn't really crossed until then. And it was just amazing how fate, how Providence had aligned that to make you feel better and to build a bond between us about how, that it is a good undertaking.
Well, and Masonry for me, I think, has been a real eye-opening experience. Just talking with the five guys here, talking with Masons, around the world about philosophy and religion has really helped me open my mind, and I've let go, I think, some of the nitty-gritty dogmatic pieces of Christianity that have held me back, and I'm still working to figure out a little bit more about who I am in my own personal faith. But Masonry and the conversations that I have with Masons has been a huge help for me, making my faith much less of a communal thing and much more of a personal thing, if that makes any sense.
Well, it really does, because Anderson, when he wrote his Constitution, for the charges of Freemasonry, he has God and religion as the first charge to Freemasons, and essentially he describes what the purpose of Freemasonry is to become the center of union and a means of conciliating true friendship among persons that have remained at a perpetual distance. That's it's kind of interesting that you describe that by being able to see how other people perhaps practice or how they believe, it actually works on your own, and even though some people might believe that it might just detract from it or steal from it, and I think that's a lot of reasons why a lot of certain religious groups view Freemasonry with a little bit of worry, trepidation, is because they worry that by seeing how the rest of the world practices and works, you're not going to follow the true faith. But it's really not about that at all. It's just saying, these people are in our community. This is just especially in the United States, this is just our American story, is that, different religions exist. And it's just the ability for us to work on our own growth within our own faith traditions.
Now, Nick, you're a big brain. I want to pick your brain on this. Since you're a walking encyclopedia of Masonic knowledge, I wanted to know, where did the synthesis of St. Thomas Aquinas' teachings and Masonic ritual get fused together? Was it Christianized via Anderson or the foundation of the Grand Lodge? I mean, where do you think that came from? Why is that still prevalent?
I would say that we were fortunate that William Preston was able to see so many books, since he was a printer, and he was able to see so many books going through, and he was very well read. I think we, as Freemasons, sometimes we believe that we are originators of these truths, but we're not. We're people that are readily available to take them with us. And so I think what happened was, these concepts of Thomas Aquinas and everything else existed outside of what we have now, and it's that we adopted them and then repurposed them to a more Enlightenment era concept. And that's really the great thing about Freemasonry, is it's a lot like a filter that can kind of mold and remove the things that don't function properly anymore. And I think that would probably be my guess, is that this was...
That's interesting, because that brings up the next question I had, which was, if you go back to our Enlightenment era Freemasons episode, you can see a lot of these brothers were influenced...
62.
Thank you. Episode 62. These brothers were leading the charge and breaking the dogmatic coverage from the Catholic Church, and they were focusing more on Enlightenment ideas and reason. So to put in a Aquinas thought on faith as a dogmatic thing in a post-Enlightenment ritual, right, on reason and experiencing nature. We talked about these brothers who thought that life should be experienced rather than instructed, and so it seems to fly in against those Enlightenment ideas. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good point, and a very good distinction that you're making there. And I think it's just the availability in which they had these sources. So, with Freemasonry, because we are based off of essentially guilds that were working on churches, and so obviously we would take those concepts of church teachings and bring them back to our own. And especially, a lot of the things that we see in our lodges are Church of England, concepts. We have wardens, we we have, officers that deacons. We have officers that have very specific reasons to exist in that church. And so I think it was just a convenience that they had these available. And, they would constantly reference back. So, you have Mackey, who's referring to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, where he says, "Now faith is an assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." And I think it's because he was looking back. Not only was he taking those Enlightenment theories, but he was synthesizing them with the faith doctrines that were already in existence. And so perhaps it was this attempt to reconcile faith, religion, and science. And I think that might be a really good concept, a really good topic, is the idea that not only Freemasonry is this attempt to reconcile science and religion, and I think it works masterfully. Unfortunately, some people kind of see one side and other people see the others, and everybody loses. But I think if you come to it that way, it makes a lot of sense.
I
It
love
leads
that.
to truth.
Yeah. So Juan, let's get back to you to finish your thought on what you've come up with.
The other thing that I was thinking is about faith from the perspective of what Nick just mentioned in Hebrews 11, of the conviction of things not yet seen. And as an individual that aspires to do different things, as an individual that is has his mind set on achieving something, faith can be a tool that is incredibly useful as long as it's backed up by action. You see, it could be poisonous for us in our personal life, within what we see for the future of Masonry, what we see in any aspect of life. More especially, I think about it in the business sense. You can have all the faith in the world that doors are going to open up, opportunities will materialize, and okay, that's perfectly fine. But as long if you compartmentalize faith by itself and you do not support it with action, then it is like the scripture says that faith without action is void. It's empty. So one thing for us, as we encourage people to have faith in these things that they haven't yet seen, but that's just one component of the equation. You have to make sure that you have faith in what's up, you have a hope that that will materialize, and then you put all your energy and love into making sure it happens. So that's one of the aspects that I wanted, because just faith from the context of just religion, I think it's just, we're just looking at one side of it. There's that faith that we have on that our kids are going to be good kids. Yeah, you can have all the faith in the world that that's going to happen, but if you're not actually being a good parent to them, I'm sorry to tell you, it's not going to happen.
It's classic, sailboat and wind. You got to have both.
Mm-hmm. Care to elaborate, Robert?
Oh, just that we have your action, which is a man-made thing. We would build a boat is our vehicle to getting things done, and you could say your faith is the wind. This power that is beyond your control that you need to rely on. And in the context of a boat, a big boat or a sail, you can use the sail to catch the wind.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that as a young man, I went to a Lutheran academy, believe it or not, and that was something my pastor used to tell me about.
So I'm going to drop one big question on everyone before we go to social media, and that is, the implied thing we've talked about here too is that you must have faith in a supreme being to join the fraternity today, and different jurisdictions have different clarifications and caveats on what that supreme being is. And so, taken purely in the Aquinas definition, that you have to have grace-endowed faith, is that becoming too dogmatic for this younger generation of Masons, where their involvement in religion is declining, and that their aperture has been widened on various faiths and religious structures, where we may find many people in the millennial generation that are a-religious, in the sense that they don't want to be locked into a prescribed dogma. So what does that do for the fraternity as a whole? What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I've actually, if you look at Commandery, you can see the numbers declining quickly because the nons exist, right? And this is, I know I just told dirty little secret about Commandery that yes, the numbers are declining fairly rapidly. No surprise. But I think it has absolutely a lot to do with the fact that Christian as an identity is going away quickly. The nons are now becoming a larger size of the pie. This doesn't necessarily suggest that they aren't religious or spiritual or have a faith in God. It's just they don't need to define it in that particular persuasion. And it's going to be very interesting, I think, in the coming, even just maybe the next decade, to watch Commandery and see if it can pivot. I don't know if it can, because it is so ingrained with a Christian identity, a very specific, Christian identity of a different era. And so it'll be very interesting to see if they can pivot.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of eras and generational differences. Not to get stuck on this, but what I really think we're seeing with the millennial generation is a return to post-Enlightenment thinking. And that's come with this, almost neo-Enlightenment attitude that millennials as a generation have embraced, because millennials are going back to the ancient mysteries. They're much more interested in figuring things out for themselves. They're distrustful of authority figures and organized religions, and they're deeply, deeply introspective. So I think this could be seen as just one of those ebbs and flows that's come with a new generation finding its footing in the world today, where you have a bunch of people who are less interested in what the authoritative or authoritarian specifically structured formal religion, and much more interested in introspection and looking at everything that world philosophy has to offer and then figuring out what's right for themselves. And I think if you're an organization like the Knights Templar that is deeply rooted in an organized religion and has built its lore around something that frankly isn't terribly popular in today's culture, I think you're going to see that decline pretty rapidly.
So, Jason, when you mentioned the neo-enlightenment, you've talked.
I made up that term.
It's a great term, though, because when we talk about the Enlightenment, if anybody's ever had the pleasure of listening to Jason talk about the Enlightenment and Enlightenment philosophy, and it is because he's very well versed in it, he talks about the people's ability to access information, and is what brought this on. And what is the access of information that has just blown us all away, specifically in the millennial generation? We
would call that the information superhighway.
The internet, right? So because we have access to everything, there is this absolute, I don't want to say distrust of organized religions, it's just that there's so much more information available, and it's like, and Nick is going to love this, there's a scene in Big Trouble in Little China where he's saying that San Francisco Chinatown is made up of so many different types of Chinese religions and philosophies. He talks about Buddhism and Taoism and things like that. He goes, it's like your salad bar. You take what you want and you leave the rest. And that's kind of the way religion is today. We take so many parts of the different religions around the world, things that we think make sense to us. A throwback to the idea of the millennials' propensity to look inward, right? So things that we see a common, themes that we feel comfortable with, we adopt those themes. It's so interesting, and I think that the idea of faith in lodges today, I think, is still needed, but I think it needs further definition. For us in Illinois, we have a saying that says, we have to have a belief in a supreme being, and then in another area of our ritual, in the investigation committee, it says verifies a belief in God. Either one, I can't remember the way it is, but essentially it violates our Constitution and bylaws the way our investigation is. because it doesn't define it. Because it's so broadly defined, as a past Grand Master recently pointed out to me, was a supreme being to somebody could be Hitler. You just don't know. And because of that wide definition, I think there does need to be some clarification there. And yes, it is semantics, but I do think there needs to be clarification on just what that faith is. And I don't think it matters what faith, but to broaden the spectrum to say something along the lines of whatever your version of God or your faith in God is, should encompass some element of ABC. Now, for a lot of guys, which is immensely overused today, is the saying they would believe in a creative force of the universe. It's very broad, and it's also a catch-all. I mean, within that construct, you could essentially say that everything is an accident, and God could be some giant version of some weird being like Men in Black or something, right? And he's a giant idiot, and he made a mistake, and here we are.
Flying spaghetti monster.
The flying spaghetti monster. So I think we do need to redefine it for the age. I mean, I talk about a lot of things, and I harp on a lot of single points a lot of the time, but we are a progressive science, and we do need change. And I think as the tide changes, Masonry should change.
One?
Not requirements. But.
That leads perfectly into something I wanted to talk about. And if you see the majority of churches today, religious organizations, they see a decline in membership and a decline in participation and commitment, all of that. But there's a sub-segment of the church that seems to be growing by leaps and bounds, and it's the mega churches. Now, if you were to look at what's happening in these iterations of churches, is that they have been progressive, as Robert is mentioning. They are perhaps more relaxed, more accommodating to the needs of this generation. Everybody needs something. Everybody is looking for an answer, and they will be hesitant to latch on to something that is judgmental, that's just segregating, pushing people away, as opposed to what you find in the mega churches, where you go and you get a message that it's uplifting, and you get something that they're looking for. Maybe it's not for everybody, but could you imagine if we get to the era of the mega lodge? We're able to
That's amazing.
Right? Imagine.
Wait, you mean Scottish Rite?
Yeah, something like that.
I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, we need to talk more about that offline and perhaps spearhead it. But if you think about it, it's a similar situation. You have an organization that has an incredible history, tradition, and everything. And part of the reason why it's not in a growth model is because it's not adjusting fast enough. And only those who are able to either adjust fast enough or set the trend are the ones that will be then absorbing all the people that are in necessity for what they offer.
Juan Sepulveda, the Joel Osteen of the Lodge of Five Muses.
You got it, baby.
Love it.
The Lodge of Five Night Muses. So, getting back to Enlightenment thinking and faith, I think, there are, from what I've been able to tell in the ritual, there are two dogmatic assumptions that Masonry makes. The first dogmatic assumption is that there is a creator, a being or beings that created the world, the people, and everything we know. The second dogmatic assumption is the immortality of the soul, which is, again, another assumption that needs to be made if you're really going to take the lessons of the ritual to heart. And I think within the framework of Masonry, I think those are really the only two things that you need to profess going in order to get an intensely rich experience out of the fraternity. Again, I love the leeway that's given to, we are not a Christian organization, as much as people might want to make it. into it. Masonry is also not a religion, and it should not be a religion, although I know several people who have made it their religion. But when you look at people trying to figure out their faiths for themselves, and faith is a inherently a very, very personal journey. Masonry is inherently a very personal journey, but we're all about sharing those journeys with each other. And the way I would see it is without faith and trust in something or someone higher, and the trust that that you'll live on, how can you really be a cohesive brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God? Because that really is what the fraternity is all about. Your faith, your belief in something more, is the moral compass that guides you to strive to be a good man who is trying to make himself and his fellow men better. And I think that is just that's just what Masonry is all about. So you don't have to have a specific faith, but I think Masonry is not going to pay dividends for someone who just brushes off their faith and says, you know what, I'll deal with that later. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't think Masonry attracts, by and large, those kinds of people, because as it is now, you have to work hard for Masonry to even get in the door, and those people who work hard for that are going to generally be those introspective people who try to figure things out.
Now, do they agree with you on social media? That's the real question.
Everybody always agrees with me on social media.
All right, case closed.
Yep. So good night, everybody. We had a great show, and hope you all have a wonderful week. So social media, I'm going to go to Brother Chris Streeper first, who is one of our Sparklight winners. And he said, the brethren hit a nail squarely on its head. A major challenge, at least in the United States today, is the traditionally held belief that one needs to be a Christian to be a Mason. And he actually put up this this chart talking about the golden rule and how it applies to Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Jainism, Judaism, Islam, and a host of other religions. And you know what? There are a lot of religions that preach generally the same thing, which is don't be a dick to other people. And you realize, when you see it through that lens, it's hard to find that in people who are really, really gung-ho about their religions today. Just putting that out there.
Religions in itself, all these different religions are really, and somebody's gonna correct me on this, but I thought it was the Dalai Lama who said something like, a wagon wheel, all spokes lead to the center. But I'll get corrected. There's a troll out there. I know who you are.
So Chris kind of ended his couple paragraphs with a good rule of thumb for what you would need to be a Mason, and that is belief in the Supreme Being plus morality plus belief in the afterlife. And I would argue that belief in the Supreme Being, if you are really holding yourself to that, morality would be a natural extension of that. What do you all think?
I don't know if I can get down with belief in the afterlife.
That's fair.
But that's mine.
Well, actually, a lot of Near East religions didn't really care about an afterlife. Even early portions of the Old Testament, they don't really care about an afterlife. You lay with your fathers, in their what would you call that place where dead people go? I don't know. Interred. There you go. That's the one.
Well, and interestingly enough, if you get back into early Christian church history, and John's going to be giddy when I start talking about this, but you had the rise of the Gnostics and Gnosticism in about the 2nd century A.D., 1st and 2nd century A.D., and you had a big split in the early Christian church because you had the Orthodox Christian Church or the Catholic Christian Church, Catholic meaning universal, not Catholicism as we know it today,
Call that
preaching. Yes, Paul. Preaching salvation. Salvation, salvation, salvation. Grace, grace, grace. You need to believe in Christ in order to go to heaven. Done. Whereas you had the Gnostics that came up and said, no, 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 no. Faith is deeply personal, 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 and the idea is to get to know God as best as you possibly can, instead of just looking towards salvation. So in one sense, the early Christian church will split between those that were looking externally to salvation and those that were looking internally to really be the best people they could be. And I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know either, but
Sounded good.
the idea that Gnosticism is that we kind of adopt a little bit of Gnosticism within lodges.
Right.
We do have hidden truths, and Gnosticism in itself is an idea of a hidden truth to return to the Creator, or the realm of what they would call the pleroma. That's a whole other episode.
What else, Jason, on social media?
Well, you know what? Let's see. We've had a couple brethren who have actually shared some stories of how the craft has motivated them to do deeper introspection. Brother Mike, said that until he decided to become a Mason, he was floundering with his own faith, and Masonry actually forced an introspection of him, and he began to find those answers that he was looking for with his own personal faith in lodge, talking to his brethren, and just hearing about different points of view. And Brother Chris Streeper has also done similar introspection with the help of his brothers. So when you get a bunch of people in lodge together who are all really interested in building each other up to be the best people possible, I think you have a golden opportunity to work on your own personal faith. Which is a change for me, because at the beginning of my Masonic journey, I wanted to divorce my faith from my fraternity as much as possible, and
how's that working out?
Not well. And you know what? And I will be brutally honest. I have more questions about my faith now than answers.
I think that's
but I am really okay with that.
That's awesome.
That's really good, because ultimately those questions, I think, are what lead you to a better brotherhood too, right? Because it's just like it happens with men's group. My brother Scott has men's group, like a Bible study once a week, and he never misses it. And that dude, his faith is really strong, but he isn't afraid to ask questions, and he's okay with having questions.
Cool.
Yeah, you're not gonna know the answer to everything. If you think about it, faith is the ultimate occult knowledge.
Ha. I like that.
It's the ultimate hidden knowledge, especially when it comes to God and the intangible. There are some like deists who say that they don't believe that God reveals himself to his creation. So it's the ultimate hidden knowledge and the ultimate game of hide and seek that we play with ourselves to say, you know what do we know about the Creator, and how can we figure out more?
Yeah. Like, as a deist, I am fascinated with the Tales of Enoch. Fascinated. Like I love it. Right? And it's so contradictory to my faith as a deist. And a lot of deists will tell you that we don't have faith. We know.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of comes off pompous.
We are going on some weird tangents right now.
So we should probably bring it back out.
As much as I love the conversation, we are running late, so we should really start wrapping it up and carry that conversation on another day. So I want to hear more about that, Robert, so hold that thought for another episode.
It was faith. It was faith oriented.
Loosely tied together, just loosely. Okay,
Just
so
slightly out in left field.
let's bring it back home with our final thoughts and shameless plugs, starting with Juan Sepulveda.
Here's a thing to consider. As you come to lodge and you come with your own faith, your own religious beliefs, those are exercised outside of the lodge. You meet with your friends from church or your respective religion, and you build that aspect of faith in that way. When you come to lodge, ideally, you get an opportunity to share in fellowship with other men who have their own respective views about life, religion, the origin of life, and all of that. That should be a healthy balance of inquiry, where you solidify your faith with your respective group, and then you come to lodge and perhaps develop your own faith further by listening to what other people believe, having an open mind. Um, I, we were told that we shouldn't be talking about religion and politics in open lodge. Those shouldn't play a role, and we've said this before. While the lodge is tiled, no religion, no politics, and in antiquity, no nationality, because those are divisive topics. However, I strongly recommend, brothers, that you engage in these conversations in the most polite and open manner with the people that you come across. Not to judge them and not to make them feel inadequate, but so that you can have that experience of growth within your own faith. And I had an example of that recently. I'll expound more on an article that I'm writing for thegentleman'sbrotherhood.com, which in 2016 is getting some speed. So, but it wasn't necessarily a plug. I'm really writing an article about it because we talked about everything. I went on a trip with another gentleman, and we talked about everything: religion, politics, abortion, racism, everything. And never did we become irate. And we came out of it really learning a lot about each other and a lot about many things. So, brothers, take that to heart. Discuss the difficult topics like we did on episode 100. If you haven't seen that yet, go to the MasonicRoundtable.com and check it out. It has quickly climbed to be one of the most popular videos that we've put out. So if you haven't seen it yet, make sure to check it out. And finally, brothers, go to freemasonryart.com. I have a collection of Masonically themed art that incorporates symbols that can help you in your journey as a Mason. So go to freemasonryart.com and use promo code TMR, and you will be supporting this show that you're listening to right now. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Juan. Nick Johnson.
Oh, I'm back. Holy smokes. That dang mute button. It's kind of interesting. For me, I view the first theological virtue of faith less as a communal concept in Freemasonry. I think the reason we have a lot of guys that think, Freemasonry is a Christian organization, or Freemasonry is a syncretic organization, is because they're kind of missing the point. In that Freemasonry is not designed for that purpose. It's actually designed to bring men together in an organization that they would never have met any other way. Especially, taking it from its early Enlightenment era, they wouldn't have ever chatted. If you were a Protestant or a Catholic, you wouldn't have hung out in the same places. Even all the way into the 1870s, it was not done, and Freemasonry threw that out and said, no, we are going to allow men to sit in the same room and just drop that stuff for the moment, have discussions and meals, and just do the things that men want to do in the company of other men, and that was exactly the point and purpose of Freemasonry. And so for me, the concept that, there are those that want to brand Freemasonry as, a religion or something like that. And there are, especially conspiracy theorists. They want to brand it as that because they want to view Freemasonry as this very specific particular group, but it's not. It's the complete opposite. And so for me, I think it's beautiful. I have Jewish friends, I have Muslim friends now, I have Buddhist friends, Wiccan friends, OTO friends, and you know what? For me, I see them as brother. I don't see them as these particular labels, even though I just mentioned them all the way down. So, so I guess I did. But at least for the most part, I just view them as good men and true and trusty, working on that spiritual building. And so yeah, that's really what we should, as Freemasonry, be promoting, especially with an era of nons, is that we are an open organization that just brings you together and lets you meet, act, and part. With that, I have a blog, millennialfreemason.com, and yes, I did put a post up. What? It was bizarre. I haven't done that in a while. Of course, it was a post about something else, and I borrowed content about it from YouTube, so it's like getting back into working out. I'll get there. I just got to keep pumping the iron, and I'll be good. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Robert Johnson.
Final thoughts on faith. I won't go into an Enoch thing. Sorry. We just hit it so hard in the beginning of the episode that ultimately faith is a trust. And however you want to apply that, whether it's trust, as Nick pointed out, in the brothers of your lodge, regardless of what they practice, trust that you can sit in a car with a brother for 8 hours and talk about whatever you want, right? And never get upset. And part of that really comes in, go back and listen to our Cardinal Virtues episodes that talk about a lot of the necessary things you need to bring to the table when you're ready to talk about things like faith. Because a lot of times, faith leads into religion, and those are divisive, so an educated mind coming into those isn't going to get upset, right? You're always going to come and you're going to think about it, you're going to find common ground, and you're going to learn from each other. Respect everybody's faiths, their trusts, in whatever they are. I guess have a Jerry Springer moment. Trust each other, be good to each other. Ultimately, just respect everybody's trusts. Thank you for watching this show. Thanks for making episode 100 extra special. It was absolutely amazing and an absolute honor to have the gentlemen on that were on the show. I felt like I came out of it with a better understanding of what that's like. I'll never have the ability to know what that's like, but to hear the stories and to experience kind of verbally through anecdotes, you have so much more respect to what's going on. And with that, just thanks for watching this show and making it a success. Keep making it a success. Our brother recently posted, and he said, hey, you guys, there's if you have 10,000 followers on YouTube, that's all you need, 10,000 followers. You can use the London YouTube studios. Or there's one in China, and I think there's one in the U.S.
New York, Tokyo.
Yeah, I was like, oh, so we only need 7,800 more followers on YouTube. So tell your friends, even if they don't like Masonry. Subscribe, and maybe, when we go out for the big event in London, maybe we can, use that studio. Huh? Yeah.
Another thing you all need to do is subscribe to our events, because I usually keep a detailed list, a TMR distro, of about 450 people I invite to our events. Facebook isn't letting me do that anymore. So the only way that you all are going to get repeated invites from me, if we're Facebook friends, is to subscribe to our events on Facebook.
Subscribe to the events on Facebook.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, please do that because, like I said, this isn't monetized or anything. We don't do that, so this is literally just to spread the word about Masonry. And if you like Masonry, and the foothold we get, the more this show goes into people's, put it through up on Apple TV, watching it on their phones at work when they should be working. All these great things.
And you know what? The more people come to the craft because of it.
That's right.
We get emails just about every single week from brethren who say, you know what, I love your show, and your show was one of the main reasons that I took that first step in looking for a lodge. And that's incredibly humbling.
It's a compliment ever. So with that, I just want to say thank you again. If you like Masonic podcasts, please check out Whence Came You. Comes out on Sunday nights at 9:30. Episodes vary, 20 to 45 minutes, sometimes over an hour. We gab. Anyway, thank you very much.
All right. Jason.
All right. I felt bad for interrupting RJ. I was like, hey, RJ, I'm going to let you finish. But TMR is the best show ever.
It is. It's greater because of the diversity of the show. And it's really, it's come together, guys. It's amazing.
Jason Kanye Richards.
Jason Kanye Richards. Thank you.
Kanye East. Next year. This year I'd be Kanye West. So anyway, faith. It's central to who you are as a person. It defines your entire worldview, even if you think you don't have one. Lack of faith or being atheistic defines your worldview and how you view yourself as a human being and how you view your fellow man and everything in the world. So it's natural, at least it's logical, to see how faith is really the foundation of the fraternity. You don't have to be a specific faith to be a Freemason. And you shouldn't have to be a specific faith. Because when you clamp down on that diversity, that is when the entire fraternity loses out and we become weaker because of it. So I am all about as much diversity as possible within the constraints of, look, you need to follow certain dogmatic assumptions. Belief in the afterlife, again, that is debatable according to your own ideology. Although Juan did make a pretty good point about, well, could belief in the afterlife be the synonymous with wanting to leave a legacy? It's an idea. But if you just hold to those dogmatic assumptions of there is a rhyme and a reason for the world that you live in now, it was a purposeful creation, and whether that means that the Big Bang was actually the spark of life given by the Creator or what have you, I think it colors your worldview to the point where Mason really comes alive as an organization, at least to you. So faith is the foundation of this organization. Next week we're going to talk about hope and the relationship that hope has with faith. And the week after we're going to talk about love and how love is the ultimate expression of that hope, which leads you to have faith. So it's going to be a very, very exciting couple weeks. You guys are not going to want to miss it because we're going to have a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. Subscribe to our Facebook events, please, because Facebook isn't letting me invite everybody under the sun anymore.
Thank you, Jason. In summary, subscribe to all the things. Everything we've got, subscribe. It'll make it much easier to it all. We got an RSS feed. We got lots of good stuff there. But in all seriousness, it helps us get this information out to you quicker. I've enjoyed listening to Pastor Richards tonight. I've never heard Jason talk so much theology in one place in one time. So while he talked long, I've learned a lot from him. So my final thoughts. We've alluded to it and tried to dig into the separation of faith as a virtue, but personally, anecdotally, Masonry, as I've mentioned in our Religion and Masonry show, it has made my faith stronger. It has supplemented my own personal journey, and for most brothers that when they get initiated will get a Masonic Bible, crack it open, because in something that I unfortunately when I got initiated I did not get a Masonic Bible, so I had to find one from a relative. But there's a whole section in the beginning that goes into details about specific verses that a Freemason might be interested in, to go in a little bit more of a glossary and certain sections of the Bible that build on what we're taught in our 3 degrees. Just go back through those and see if any of those verses jump out at you now that you've had some additional knowledge, some additional context. And so that's really my takeaway of faith in general and Freemasonry is it gives you tools to look at Bible verses you previously knew in a different light, and it also gives you different context in which to explore. So take your journey of faith, apply it to your Masonry, and be a better person every day in every way. With that, thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.